Bruce Cockburn is here, and for the past 45 years, he's been recognized not only as one of this country's great musicians, but also as a voice for our consciousness and conscience. He has made us all think more than once about how the world could be a better place and has spurred many Canadians to take action to make it so. Yet at the heart of it, he is simply a songwriter who says what he feels, what he has to say. To interview him, we've asked longtime promoter Elliot Lefko to do the honor. So please welcome Elliot and a true Canadian icon, Bruce Cockburn.
Hi, everybody. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming here, and pleasure to interview you, Bruce. And I just want to say that, growing up in Toronto and going to gigs when I was a kid and buying records at Sam the Record Man, you always really inspired me. And, all these years later, still listening to your music, and you still inspire me.
Well, thank you for saying that, and you seem to have turned out okay in spite of all that, so appreciate it.
I wanted to, ask you about, first of all, talk a little bit about, where you came from and how you got started. And you told me that you grew up in Ottawa, but also that your grandparents had a farm, and you went there. Was there a story about you finding a acoustic guitar in the attic at your grandparents'?
That was a different grandmother, but yes, my mother's parents had a farm for a while in the Gatineau area. If you know the Ottawa area, it was near Old Chelsea, and it got expropriated at a certain point. It was supposed to be what they retired to, but it was taken from them, and then they had a cottage after that in a very nice place. But my dad's mother, his dad died when he was a teenager, but his mother had a three-story house that for a while we stayed in at one point for a couple of months, and I found this old guitar in the attic, and I was at that age. I was really interested in rock and roll, and there was a guitar. It was a wretched no-name of some kind, and but I was completely captivated by it. I painted gold stars on the top of it and hammered away at it as best I could, and made enough to make my parents nervous that I was going to turn out to be a rock and roller. And so they said, well, okay, you can play the guitar, but you have to promise a couple of things. You have to promise to take lessons and learn to do it properly, and you have to promise not to get a leather jacket and grow sideburns. So I said, okay, that sounded like a good enough deal. So, I didn't get the leather jacket and the sideburns for quite a while after that. But I did take the lessons, which was really a great thing because I learned all kinds of interesting stuff right away and got introduced to a whole new range of music through the lessons that it would have taken me a lot longer to discover, I suppose, anyway. So it worked out.
And when you were taking lessons, did you learn blues, jazz, folk, all different types of music?
Yes and no. The guy I took lessons from was a guy named Hank Sims, who used to have a music store in Ottawa, and he was kind of out of the Chet Atkins, Les Paul world, so kind of jazzy, country-oid stuff, and so that's basically what he taught me. But what I'd already had music lessons. I'd been playing trumpet for 3 years and clarinet for a year before that, and so I knew how to read music. But Hank taught me to read on the guitar, and taught me a lot of what people used to call jazz chords and that sort of thing, which it wasn't that interesting to me at first, but once I started listening to the music that stuff was associated with, not so much Les Paul, but actual jazz, Wes Montgomery and people like that, then it was like, oh yeah, this was really exciting music, and so I benefited greatly from having been exposed to it when I was.
And skipping ahead a little bit, you went to the Berklee School in Boston, and that's where a lot of really great guitar players come from. A lot of great musicians come from. People can play really fast. And how did that influence you going there?
Well, we got to the end of high school, and my parents were going, well, you got to go to college. And I don't want to go to college. I just want to play guitar. Hang out. But we settled on music school because it was mutually acceptable, as long as the music school could offer a degree. And Berklee that year, or the previous year, had just become accredited enough that they could offer degrees. And so we went down my dad and I into Boston and had an interview with the registrar, and it worked out okay. I was studying composition, and I'd been doing it on my own for a few years before that. It's hard to know exactly how to compress this into something that won't bore this shit out of you. But I did a fair amount of theory studies during high school as well as the guitar. So I was trying to write for large jazz ensembles, and that's what I went to Berkeley to study. But after a while, after being there for a year and a half or so, I realized that wasn't where I needed to be going, and I dropped out. But I learned a lot from being there too, and a lot of what I learned there shows up in what I do now in perhaps not so obvious ways. But I feel like my right hand is folk music, and the left hand is kind of poorly absorbed jazz training. That's perhaps a simple way to put it.
No, that's good. And you said when you were kicking around in Ottawa, and then you started to join some bands at that point, and you joined a band in Toronto. And what was it like performing in a band at that time? Because it's been a long time since you played in a band.
Yeah, I had played in little pickup bands during the time I was in high school, and then while I was at Berkeley, I played in a jug band, and we had another little group for a while that, two other groups actually. One was pretty interesting. It was just a rehearsal band, but it was playing free jazz on Saturday afternoons, fueled by wine and a Vicks product that you, if you abused, would provide you with a lot of energy. We had a great time playing free jazz on Saturdays, but that band never worked, but the jug band had a few gigs, and a couple other people that I played with had a few gigs. So when I came, and then I dropped out of music school, went back to Ottawa, joined a band called The Children, which was the product of, or the formation of a whole bunch of my folky friends. And they invited me to join them as a keyboard player because there were too many guitar players, and it's the same old story, right? But, which I did. And then that led to, through the second half of the 60s, a succession of different bands, the second last of which was based here in Toronto, and started out being called the Flying Circus, and then changed its name to All of Us partway along because a band from Australia came along, moved here, and had a radio hit, a minor radio hit, and they were called the Flying Circus, so we had to change our name, which was another sort of universal risk back then, and probably still is for people. So that band only had maybe half a dozen gigs in its entire existence, but they were interesting ones. We opened for Wilson Pickett at Massey Hall. We opened for Cream in Ottawa. We opened for Jimi Hendrix in Montreal. And there were a few other things, Signal sort of moments like that, but otherwise it was, a hungry band. And I realized all through this period I've been writing songs. So and by that time, by around, from between through 66 through 68, I had a bunch of songs. Most of them were absolute garbage, but there were a few of them that really worked, and they worked better when I played them alone than with any of these bands that weren't really that great. So I decided I was going to go solo, and at that point, sort of, it was a wave. I suppose I caught that wave of singer-songwriter popularity that was going through, and what goes around comes around. So even if you think it's your own idea, sometimes it isn't. So there I was, well, people are tired of psychedelic jamming and wanking, and extended solos and all that stuff. I'm going to play something quieter that I think people are ready for. And it's, of course, because my own ears were ready for it, but and also because it was just in the air to do. So I took that little core body of material that I had that I liked and went solo.
And when you did your first record and you were in the studio, it's been a lot of records since then, but what do you remember about standing there in the studio doing those songs that you wrote that were really heartfelt for you, your first body of work?
I remember being quite stressed about it because, it's like, I have to get this right because this is it, but it was actually a pretty easy process. I mean, that first album, we basically made in 3 days. I, of course, had all the songs ready, those and more, but, you know, that was the budget we had, and that's what, I don't think anybody had any expectation that it would have to take longer than that. I wanted to make a very minimalist record. I didn't want strings, and I didn't want a big band or anything like that. I wanted it to sound like it sounded like when I played the songs, like my heroes of the time, Mississippi John Hurt, or you know, those old blues guys who were a big influence on me, as well as the jazz scene. And so I thought, you know, when I listened to their records, I heard a purity that I wanted to have in my own. And that suited Bernie Finkelstein, whose job it was to round up the money to make the record, because it made because he had to work a lot less hard to round up the money.
Speaking of Bernie Finkelstein, who's here, I have to say he's a big hero of mine, and you know, they should put a plaque on Bernie Finkelstein somewhere in the city, you know, for all the work he's done for musicians in the city.
Yeah.
How did you meet Bernie, and how did you get signed to True North?
I met Bernie when the Children, the first Ottawa band, opened for the Love and Spoonful at Maple Leaf Garden. And Bernie, well, we were the cannon fodder preceding the real opening act, which was the Poppers. So Bernie was there with the Poppers, and we met, you know, in the back room. But after that, he was a regular around Yorkville when I was in the Flying Circus. So we didn't really know each other, but I saw him around, and you know, we had a kind of nodding acquaintance after a while. And then I ended up getting to know the guys in Kensington Market a little bit when he was managing them. So, and that led to a greater acquaintance with Bernie. But we didn't start to get to know each other really until we started working together, which was partly the fault of Gene Martinek, who was the lead guitar player in Kensington Market, and he and I had gotten to be friends. And after our various bands had broken up, and we were sitting in a cafe in Yorkville one day talking, and I wanted to make a record, and Gene wanted to be a record producer, and he said, I know this guy that wants to start a record company. And it was Bernie. So that's kind of how it started, and we all got together and decided to do a record.
It's amazing, too, just to touch on True North, that Martin Mills was here from Beggar's Banquet, and he was talking about how he was influenced by, and Daniel Glass, by all the great labels like Elektra. And when you saw Elektra record, you knew what it was going to be, the quality. And I think same thing for True North, you know, over the years, just like you know, a beacon of quality and a really great music too.
Yeah, I think, well, this is, we don't want to embarrass Bernie with excessive praise here, but Bernie ran the label really well, and he had really good taste. You know, if I do say so myself, I guess. You know, one of the things that characterized that record label was an appreciation of the music. There was never a sense that it was about the business only. You know, the business was important. Obviously, it was important to all of us, but it had to be good first. You know, which suited me because I always felt that way about everything that I was involved with or that I wanted to listen to.
And with True North, Marie McLaughlin was also making some great music at the time. And what was it like with your relationship with Murray? Because you were both putting on such great music for such a long time. Was there like a friendly competition as far as like, you know, between the two of you? Because you just, I mean, as far as like who can up each other or make great music like that?
I never felt competitive particularly. I mean, Murray really introduced me to the Toronto folk scene. I had that year where I lived here when I was in the band, but I didn't really meet people. I didn't get around much, and I never really noticed that scene at the time. Even though I was in touch with its Ottawa manifestation from people coming through there to play, but I met Murray in Ottawa first at a mutual friend's house, and then we got to be pals, and he introduced me to Estelle Klein and the Mariposa Folk Festival people and a whole bunch of others, and so, you know, and we hung out a lot together in the early 70s. Later on, our lives kind of went in different directions, but you know, we were less inclined to be hanging out together, but initially we spent a lot of time, and I don't, like I said, I never felt competitive about it. I felt like there was a good give and take in terms of songwriting. Murray would write something, and be like, oh, that's really cool, you know, and you know, I don't really know. I guess I had the feeling that he felt the same about me. But
And speaking of Mariposa, like Mariposa was the Coachella of its day. I mean, it was an amazing place, and you as a performer performing there, it must have been amazing to see some of your heroes there too, like a lot of the blues guys who played there too, as well as Indigenous Canadian groups, and then I don't know, other people like Jackson Brown, whomever. What was it like for you in the heyday of Mariposa?
well, the festival, the most interesting part of it for me was actually getting to hear people that I didn't know. So, you know, along with the people you mentioned, who were always great to sort of see and hear in person, but in a way I sort of got more out of listening to the records because I could spend more time with it and focus better than I could in a live situation, especially kind of a big buzzing scene like a festival. But you'd be at Mariposa and there'd be somebody like Alhaji Bai Conte, this a kora player from Gambia. I'd never heard of the kora, and this guy was playing this incredible music. And that was the kind of stuff, or a Cajun band, or whatever. There'd be stuff that was new to me and that was the really exciting thing about Mariposa and the other festivals that I got to play at.
And in 1980, you wrote Wonder Where the Lions Are, and it became a hit for you. And it broke open a lot of doors for you, especially in the US, and you got on Saturday Night Live. What was that experience like for you?
Saturday Night Live was a trip. We were on with a band called the Amazing Rhythm Aces, who had a big hit, that Third Rate Romance, I think was the song. So they're there, and I was just blind with fear through the whole thing, because there we are in New York, make it or break it, play live, don't screw it up, you know, this intense pressure. And all of the people that worked at Saturday Night Live seemed to manifest exactly that same pressure. They were friendly enough in their way, and certainly respectful, but there was just this tension everywhere, which I took on in addition to what I was carrying myself. So the guy at one point, the guitar player from the Amazing Rhythm Aces, came over and sort of introduced himself and went to shake hands, and I could barely speak to him, so, you know, okay, fine, we shook hands and said hi, and then I didn't talk to him after that because I was too nervous to talk. So, and years later, I was in West Virginia doing a radio show called Mountain Stage, and this guy was one of the other artists by himself this time. So I went over and I was feeling bad about this, and I apologized to him, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I don't remember. I was probably drunk." And so he had his way of getting around the nerves too, I guess. But anyway, that's what I remember. I remember it was the Saturday Night Live that still had the original cast, Steve Martin and all that, and Hugh Marsh, who was playing violin with me at the time in the band, was a big fan of all those comedians, and he wanted to get Steve Martin's autograph, and Steve Martin gave him this really hostile brush off. He was crestfallen. You know, but that was, we got away with it, and we played the song. I mean, it's still all over the internet. I've seen it recently by accident, because I don't go looking for things like that. But it was a tolerable performance of the song, and a lot of people noticed it. So.
And I was talking to David Dye, who's the host of World Cafe in Philadelphia, like an amazing show. And he gave me an anecdote. He said that he was working at the time for a radio station, and there was a promotion where they wanted you to play in a zoo in front of the lions. And he said you were so pissed off about that.
Yeah, it was January, and it was outdoors, and it was 8 a.m, and it was like, this was Donnie Einer, who was the Einer brothers were kind of the Millennium Records, which was who we were with in the States at the time. This is, outside of Canada, there have been distribution deals with many different labels over the years, and it's always been True North here, but elsewhere it's been other labels. So at that point it was Millennium, and Donnie Einer, who later became the president of Columbia Records, was doing all the promo stuff for his brother Jimmy. So he was in charge of getting Wondering Where the Lions Are on the radio, and he was up to all kinds of stuff. They showed up at a station in the Midwest with a lion on a leash and scared the bejeebers out of everybody at the radio station. Oh my God, among other things. So we're in Philadelphia, and I'm playing a gig, and Donnie says to me, "Oh, we got to do this thing in the morning." And it's like, yeah, just show up. All you have to do is show up. And so okay, well, it's okay. If I just have to show up to get my picture taken, fine. In front of the lion cage. It sounded stupid to me, but that's okay. That's what we're doing. So, it's freezing out there. It's winter. It's icy. It's snow. And so it comes around 7:30. Johnny comes to get me. Oh, you better bring your guitar. They'll want it for the pictures. I'm not taking my guitar out of its case in 20 below weather. It's going to crack. Oh, just bring it anyway. Just So then I get there and they've got bleachers set up and there's an audience sitting there. And the short version is I ended up having to play Wondering Where the Lions Are in front of the lion cage to this little audience of radio listeners and whatever. And it was Donnie kind of strung me along this way. I was really angry about it, but in the end, it's a story. That's all. And it wasn't really that bad. But those people sitting there shivering with their breath coming up like this was a sight to behold.
David wondered if that inspired Pacing the Cage, but but just speaking of Pacing the Cage, it's one of my favorite songs from you. It's such a powerful song. Can you just talk about that song?
Yeah, well, I don't remember how the specific image of Pacing the Cage came to me, but I was living on a horse farm west of Toronto at the time. This is in the mid-'90s, and things weren't going that well for me personally, and so I felt like I was stuck. There's a line in another song that sort of adds to the overall understanding, perhaps, in a song called Night Train. It refers to people being prisoners only of the choices they've made. And I felt at this time like I was kind of a prisoner of the choices I'd made and couldn't see a way out of it. But so it ended up, that body of feeling kind of ended up producing the song. The opening lines of it are literal. I turned off of Highway 25 into the laneway at one point, and the sun was going down ahead of me, and it looked like the cloud formation just made it look like there was an angel holding a bloody sword. That's what I thought of. So that's what started the actual writing of the song. But I mean that feeling of being trapped in where you've gotten yourself to, I think, is a pretty common human feeling, and I hope for everybody's sake that none of us have to spend too long in that state. But I don't think I'm the only one who's been there.
And another experience going to Guatemala then and seeing what was happening, and you wrote If I Had a Rocket Launcher. And I want to say too that you have a lot of these serious songs and you're sending a message, but they rock still, these songs, which is really important. Like they're amazing, kick-ass kind of songs.
Well, I think if you're going to be a songwriter, you have to try to be the best songwriter you can be. If you're going to be a propagandist, that's a different set of considerations. And so, for me, the song, the starting point is like, how do I make a good song? Period. Not about this X, Y, or Z or whatever, but just how do I make a good song? What are good words to use? What are good notes to put with the words? And then an idea will come, and the idea is approached from that perspective. So If I Had a Rocket Launcher the lyrics for that came out pretty quickly after having had the experience that I had, which was not a violent experience per se. The people that I was among had experienced unbelievable violence. And it was their stories and the poignancy of their situation that produced the song. But it produced a very strong feeling of empathy and pain in me to be among these people. So, I started writing the song right away, and then it didn't get finished until I was back in Toronto. And there it was a case of writing the lyrics, and the music came along quite a bit later. And just looking for a rhythm that would carry those words and carry those feelings in the best way.
Another popular song was Lovers in a Dangerous Time, and it gave a whole rebirth to you when the Bare Naked Ladies did the version, on the Bruce Cockburn tribute record. It almost reminds me of like Run DMC and Aerosmith too. Like how they gave a whole new life to that song,
this
right?
way.
And and then Bono quotes it, and it's such a great song.
Thanks. That song I wrote. I was living at the corner of College and Clinton, above what was then a fish store. I think it's a Japanese restaurant now, but across from Cafe Diplomatico, and at that point, Cafe Diplomatico was the entire College Street strip. So that was the setting. But my older daughter was quite young at that point. I don't remember what year it was, so I don't remember her exact age. But she was a little kid in school, and there was all this stuff happening. And we were starting to hear actual overt surface reporting of environmental deterioration, and of there was AIDS that was still like a big news at that time, and people dying all over the place from that, and there was all this stuff, and I thought, what kind of scary world are these kids growing up into? These little kids, and I pictured them holding hands in the schoolyard and just thinking, I got to write something for them. So that was the starting point for that song, and it got applied, of course, because of AIDS, and because it talks about being castigated for being lovers, or having people get in your face for it. That a lot of listeners interpreted it as being about that, and that was fine with me too, because I wasn't thinking of it when I wrote the song, but I'm totally happy to have it be thought of that way. But it started out a little bit folky, kind of closer to the way that I now perform it solo. But when we got in the studio, the album that was on was produced by John Goldsmith and Kerry Crawford, and they got hold of the song, and they were sort of thinking, if we could just goose up the rhythm a little bit and make it a little bit rockier, and it worked really well. So that's what you hear.
And on another note, you did the theme song for Franklin.
Yeah, on another note, yeah. That was an experiment, which I've at times regretted, and I no longer regret it. Actually, now I have another daughter. That older daughter is now a grown-up woman with 4 kids, but I have a 2-year-old daughter as well. So Franklin is kind of like, look what Dad did. Hey, it's actually become kind of a gift. So, yeah. But in the beginning, it was like, I've never done a theme music for a kids' TV show before, so I thought it was an interesting thing to try. I had done some film music before that, but this was something new. But it was a little bit, it worked out very well in the end, but it was a little bit too much like doing a commercial for my taste, to want to sort of make a career of that sort of stuff. There was too much consultation with people in suits and all that sort of thing about the contents of this 30-second song. And to me, that was, like, okay, look, here's an idea. If you don't like it, blank, But in the end, they did. There was a bit of negotiating back and forth, but I don't like to write that way. I like to just do what I do.
And I also wanted to ask you about working with Thibaut Burnett, because you worked with him, a while ago, and now he's gone on to do such great work now too, with so many different artists. And what kind of atmosphere in the studio was it working with T-Bone?
I did 2 albums with him, and one of them, the atmosphere was incredible. The other was a little less so, but both of them worked out well. And T-Bone is a brilliant producer of records, and has a brilliant musical mind. He's one of the most careful, perhaps the most careful listener I've ever worked with. He'd sit and he'd listen to a take of a song, and for him, what you were after in the studio was capturing the essence of the song, the spirit of the song, and anything that interfered with that had to go or be fixed or whatever. And he would listen to things and he'd hear the smallest little drum hit that wasn't appropriate in his mind. And he was pretty convincing about making his views known to the rest of us. And it was a really educational experience working with him, to be forced to listen so closely to things, and also his just his whole approach of kind of capturing essentially a live performance of a song in the studio as opposed to building it up in layers. We did a little bit of that too, but it came down, at some point there was always the need to have a happening performance of the song.
Another song with the Tree Falls, was that in relation to the Haida Indians in Canada?
If a Tree Falls wasn't exactly, there's a song called Stolen Land that Hugh Marsh and I wrote for an occasion that was a fundraiser for the Haida in their land claim struggle, which they ultimately were successful in one of the few cases. But If a Tree Falls came out of actually listening to a radio documentary on one of the Toronto college stations. I don't remember which one, but I was driving home from somewhere, and I'm listening to this documentary about the destruction of the rainforest in Borneo, and thinking, if that's happening there, it's happening other places. And then of course we started hearing about Brazil and other stuff like that, but it was the specific kind of personal nature of this documentary, whoever it was. I don't remember any of the details now. But I thought, that made me want to say something about the topic. I had never been in a tropical rainforest at that time, but I was familiar with the rainforests on the west coast of Canada, and so I had an idea what being in old growth was like, and I just started writing the song. I don't know why I thought of the line, "If a tree falls," I mean, it's that old, the Psych 101 cliche, but it just seemed to apply to the situation, and nobody had done it, so, okay, there we go.
We're out of time now, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to talk with me and with the audience here today.
Oh,
and
thanks.
I really enjoyed it, and you got a great body of work, and lots more work to come, and your collaboration with Bernie in the future. So I look forward to hearing more music.
I look forward to it myself. The last couple of years, all the creative juice has gone into writing a memoir, me and everyone else in the world, and so I haven't been writing songs at all, and I'm really looking forward to getting the damn book done so I can get back to writing songs. And I'll add my thanks to Elliot for all of you being here, and thank you, Elliot.